The photograph landed on his desk on a Thursday evening, and J10 didn't look up from it for 4 minutes straight. His security team was still talking. Reports, numbers, threat assessments, the usual language of a world that ran on precision and fear. J1 had sat through 1,000 of these briefings. He could recite the structure in his sleep, but for 4 minutes, 4 full minutes, he heard none of it. The photograph was surveillance. Routine. A woman caught on a Gangnam street at night, completely unaware of the camera. She had her own camera raised, head tilted slightly, completely absorbed in whatever she was seeing through the lens. The city behind her was all fractured light and shadow. She looked like someone who had forgotten the rest of the world existed. J1 set the photograph down on the desk, carefully, the way you set down something fragile. Who is she? The room went quiet. His head of security cleared his throat. A photographer, sir. American. She was in the vicinity during the Gangnam incident. Her camera may have captured some of our... I didn't ask what she photographed. Silence. I asked who she is. Nobody in that room had seen J1 ask about a person that way before, not once in 6 years of working for him. They exchanged glances that lasted less than a second, the kind of glance that means did you see that without anyone saying a word. Find out everything, J1 said quietly, and bring her to me. He said it the way he said everything, low, final, completely certain, but his hand, hidden beneath the desk, invisible to every man in that room, was not completely certain. His hand had tightened around nothing, just for a moment, just for a second. He was 34 years old. He had inherited the most powerful criminal dynasty in Seoul at 19. He had never once in those 15 years wanted something just for himself, until right now. And he didn't even know her name yet. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've been here before, you already know we don't do ordinary love stories on this channel. Stay until the end because I promise you, this one will stay with you. Hit that subscribe button right now because what's coming in the next 20 minutes is the kind of story you'll want to find again. Zara Kingston arrived in Seoul with a camera bag, a carry-on she'd packed in 20 minutes, and a grief she was pretending was manageable. Her father had died 4 months earlier. Marcus Kingston, a man who loved jazz and strong coffee and never once told his daughter enough about the life he'd lived before she was born. Zara had watched him carry something heavy her entire childhood and never asked what it was. Now she couldn't ask, so she did what she always did when life got too loud inside her own head. She picked up her camera, she took an assignment, she moved. Seoul was supposed to be 3 weeks. A prestigious photography contract, in and out, clean, no complications. The night before her flight, she sat on the floor of her father's study, going through the last of his belongings, rationing his old journal the way you ration the last of something irreplaceable. She found a photograph she didn't recognize. Seoul skyline in the background. Her father, younger, lighter, like a man who had just put something down, standing beside a Korean man she had never seen. Both of them smiling the way people smile when they share something that belongs only to them. She turned it over. Nothing on the back. She stared at it for a long time, then tucked it into her journal and told herself she'd figure it out later. Her best friend Dom called the moment the taxi hit the highway from the airport. "You're running again." "I'm working," Zara said, camera already raised to the window. "There's a difference." "Mm-hmm." Dom's voice carried 12 years of unconvinced friendship in 2 syllables. "Just be careful, okay? You always fall in love with the wrong cities." Zara laughed. "I'll be fine." She had no idea. Seoul hit her the way it hits everyone who is ready for it, like a feeling you don't have a name for yet. She arrived in Itaewon, with her camera already raised before she'd cleared the taxi, and immediately felt the particular electricity of a city that never quite sleeps and never quite stops surprising you. That first night, she wandered further than she should have. The light on a narrow Gangnam street at 11 o'clock was extraordinary. golden and fractured, spilling out of a convenience store onto wet pavement, and Zara chased it the way she chased anything beautiful. Without thinking, without looking up. She heard the tension before she saw it, two groups of men, facing each other across the street. The particular silence of a situation that had already been decided and was simply waiting for someone to move first. Zara pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, every instinct telling her to stay completely still and wait for this to be over. And then, silence, total and immediate. A black car pulled up, a door opened, a man stepped out. He wasn't the tallest person there. He wasn't the loudest. He didn't reach for anything or raise his voice or make any kind of scene. He simply stepped out of that car and stood there and spoke 3 words in Korean. Quiet, measured, final. And every single man on that street chose to leave. Immediately, without argument. Zara had photographed conflict zones. She had stood in rooms where powerful men performed power for each other. She had never in her life seen anything like what she just witnessed. The man turned, and Jay won. O looked at Zara Kingston for the first time. In person, fully, the photograph on his desk suddenly feeling like a poor translation of something that required the original. She still had her camera raised halfway. She'd completely forgotten she was holding it. His eyes moved from the lens to her face. Something passed through his expression. Not surprise, exactly. More like the very controlled stillness of a man who has just encountered something he wasn't prepared for and has decided in real time not to show it. "You should be more careful," he said quietly, "about where you point that." He got back in the car. The door closed. The street was empty. Zara stood there for a long moment, then slowly lowered her camera and looked at the screen. She had taken a photograph without realizing it. Him, half-turned in the fractured light, expression unguarded for just one fraction of 1 second. Something in his face that wasn't cold or commanding or controlled, something that looked almost like longing. She stared at it for a long time. She didn't delete it. Drop a comment right now. Are you Team Zara or Team J1? Let me know because this story is about to get so much more complicated. She saw him again the next morning, because of course she did. The cultural event she'd been contracted to photograph. High ceilings, important people. The kind of room where everyone is performing a version of themselves for everyone else. Zara moved through it the way she always did, invisible behind her lens, seeing everything, until she wasn't invisible anymore. J1. O stood at the center of the room the way a fixed point stands at the center of motion. Everything moving around him. Nobody quite able to explain why. He was in conversation, composed, present, and somehow across a crowded room full of people competing for his attention, his eyes found her. Like she'd made a sound only he could hear. She didn't look away. Neither did he. First time in Seoul? A voice at her shoulder. She turned. A younger man. Easy grin, warm eyes, the kind of energy that fills a room without trying. That obvious? Only because you're looking at my brother like he's a puzzle, the man said cheerfully. Most people look at him like he's a verdict. What's the difference? He smiled. Puzzles. You actually want to figure out. Min Jun-oh, the younger brother. The one the empire hadn't quite finished shaping yet. Zara noted the family resemblance, same jaw, same dark eyes, and immediately filed him under unknown, proceed with caution. She smiled back politely and turned her lens elsewhere. She wasn't here to make friends, especially not with strangers who happened to be related to men who made entire streets go quiet. That evening, 3 cars back in traffic, a black vehicle followed her taxi all the way to her hotel. She watched it in the side mirror the whole way. Heart steady, she'd learned a long time ago that panic was only useful if it gave you somewhere to go. She noted the make, the distance it kept, the way it peeled off exactly 1 block before her hotel, like someone who knew where she was going already. Someone did know where she was going. That was the problem. She locked her hotel room door, pushed a chair against it the way she'd seen in movies, and immediately felt both safer and slightly ridiculous, and called Dom. "Okay," she said the moment Dom picked up. "Don't panic." "Zara, I'm fine, I'm completely fine. I just need to think out loud for a minute." "What happened?" "I may have accidentally photographed some people I wasn't supposed to photograph." The silence from Atlanta was significant. "And now someone is following me," Zara continued, "and I don't know who it is or what they want, and I am trying very hard to stay calm. Come home. I can't just book a flight tonight. Come home." "Dom, Zara, I am not playing with you right now." She sat on the edge of the bed, looked at the chair propped against the door, looked at the city glowing through the curtains. "Let me figure out what this is first," she said. "I'll call you tomorrow. I promise." She did not sleep. She lay in the dark, running through every possibility. Every face she'd photographed, every street she'd walked down, every moment she'd been somewhere she maybe shouldn't have been. She was a photographer, not an investigator. She captured things. She didn't get involved in things. This was not supposed to be her world. Her phone rang at 7 the next morning. Unknown number. She stared at it for 3 full rings, then answered. "Miss Kingston." She sat up immediately, that voice, the street, the 3 words. "How do you have this number?" "I have a great many things," J1 said, "including information that your current location is no longer safe. My men will be outside in 20 minutes. "Absolutely not. Miss Kingston." "No, I don't know you. I don't know your men. I don't know how you know my name or my number or where I'm staying, and all of those things are deeply alarming. You need to understand that from where I'm standing, this situation looks like I accidentally saw something I wasn't supposed to see, and now a very powerful stranger is trying to relocate me, and I have seen enough news to know that nothing about that sentence is okay." A pause, longer than she expected. "That is a reasonable concern," he said. She blinked. She had not expected that. "Your camera captured the faces of men who work for an organization called the Bayek Syndicate," he continued. "They are aware of this. They will come for the camera, and they will not be careful about who is holding it when they do. I am not asking you to trust me. I am giving you information and a choice. And if I say no, then I will have my men watch the building from outside, and you will spend tonight not sleeping, and tomorrow wondering if every person you pass on the street is connected to this. Or," he paused, "you come somewhere I can actually guarantee your safety. The apartment has a rooftop, full view of the city. I was told you're here for photography." Zara said nothing for a long moment. She hated that last part worked. "I want to be able to leave whenever I choose," she said. "You're not a prisoner, Miss Kingston." "I want to hear you say it." A beat. "You can leave whenever you choose," he said. She packed in 20 minutes, the whole time telling herself this was practical, logical, the sensible response to a credible threat. The rooftop had nothing to do with it. The rooftop had everything to do with it. She was a photographer. She was only human. The apartment was extraordinary. She walked through it slowly, arms crossed, camera bag still on her shoulder like she was ready to leave at any moment, and felt souls spread out below her in every direction, like the city had been arranged specifically for her lens. Nobody met her at the door. A member of staff showed her to a room, explained the basics, left quietly. The apartment felt both safe and completely unfamiliar. Like wearing someone else's coat. Warm. Wrong-shaped. She put her bag down and stood at the window for a long time. Then she called Dom back and explained as much as she understood, which was not very much, and listened to Dom tell her to come home for 7 uninterrupted minutes before convincing her barely that she was okay. She wasn't entirely sure that was true. She wanted it to be. The first morning she came out of her room early and found the kitchen. She was hungry and anxious, and the combination made her restless in a way that needed to be managed with something practical. She was measuring coffee when she heard movement and turned to find J1. O already at the counter, dressed, phone in hand, reading something with the focused stillness of a man who had been awake for hours. He looked up. "Good morning," she said. Careful, neutral. He nodded, looked back at his phone. She stood there a moment. The kitchen was large enough that they weren't close, but small enough that the silence had weight. "How long will I be here?" she asked. "Until the situation is resolved." "What does resolved mean? What are we talking? Days? Longer?" "It means when it's safe." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now." She turned back to the coffee, made 2 cups. She'd noticed how he took his the night before, the staff had brought it to him, and she'd been paying attention the way you pay attention to everything when you're trying to figure out if someone is dangerous. She set one near him without a word. He looked at the cup, then at her. Something flickered across his expression. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." She sat at the far end of the counter with her own cup and her phone and made herself look busy. He returned to his. The silence settled between them, not comfortable, not hostile, something unnamed and in between. He left without saying anything else. She finished her coffee alone and told herself that was fine. It was fine. She spent that day on the rooftop with her camera. Seoul from above was a different city entirely. The chaos organized itself into patterns. The noise became visual. Everything that felt overwhelming at street level turned into something almost beautiful from up here. She shot for hours, lost herself in it, felt, for the first time since arriving, like herself. When she came back inside, there was food on the kitchen counter, covered, still warm, no note, no explanation. She stood and looked at it for a moment, then sat down and ate. She didn't say anything to him about it. Neither did he. That was how it went in those early days, a quiet exchange of small gestures that neither of them acknowledged out loud. She made coffee. Food appeared. She left the rooftop door unlocked when she came down in case he wanted to use it. She found her photography equipment from the hotel neatly arranged near the door one morning without having asked. She thanked him for that one directly. He nodded, went back to his work. She tried once more to have a real conversation. Found him in the living room one evening and sat nearby and asked something genuine. About the city, about a neighborhood she'd been photographing, something with an actual answer. He responded, briefly, accurately, returned to what he was doing. She understood then that the wall wasn't personal. It wasn't specifically about her. It was structural, built into him. So long ago, it had become architecture. You didn't get through it by asking questions. You didn't get through it at all, maybe. She stopped trying to force it and let the small, quiet gestures be what they were. It was enough. For now. The knock on her door came on an evening when she was editing photographs and trying not to think too hard about anything. She opened it to find Minjun-oh with a takeaway bag and the relaxed confidence of someone who had decided they were already friends. "I brought food," he said. "The real kind." She looked at him. "I don't know you." "I'm Minjun, Jaewon's brother." "I know who you are." "Then you know I'm the less alarming one." "Being less alarming than your brother is a very low bar." He laughed, genuinely. Not the performed laugh of someone trying to charm their way into a room. A real one. "That's fair. Can I come in anyway?" She considered him. He was open in a way his brother wasn't. Readable, warm, the kind of person whose intentions sat right on the surface where you could see them. She was still cautious. He was still a stranger. He was still related to the man who had put her in this apartment. But she was lonely, and the food smelled incredible. "You can leave that," she said, nodding at the bag. "Deal," he said, and came in and sat down and stayed for 2 hours. He talked easily about nothing threatening, the city, a terrible drama series, a restaurant in Yulgiro that had been there since before either of them was born. He didn't ask about her situation, didn't reference his brother, didn't try to explain or justify anything. He just sat in her space and was human and let her be human too. She kept her wall up the whole time. Answered carefully. Kept her distance. When he finally left, she felt lighter than she had in days and wasn't sure whether to be grateful or suspicious about that. She decided cautiously grateful. One brick at a time. He came back. She'd expected him to. There was something persistent about Min-jun in a way that wasn't pushy, just certain, like he'd already decided how this friendship was going and was simply waiting for her to catch up. She let him in again. The wall came down one careful brick at a time over the visits that followed, until she was talking to him like a real person and laughing at things and letting herself enjoy the company of someone who wasn't trying to manage her or read her or keep her at a careful distance. She trusted him slowly, properly, the way trust should be built. Not given, earned. Why does he never explain anything? She asked him one evening when she'd finally decided she could. Min-jun was quiet for a moment. She appreciated that. He didn't jump to defend or deflect. He learned young, Min-jun said, that information is power, giving it away is risk. He never unlearned that. That sounds exhausting. It is, Min-jun said simply. For him most of all. He said it without judgment and without apology, and something in that honest simplicity made her trust him completely, for the first time. It was Min-jun who eventually got her out of the apartment. Not far at first. She stayed close, kept her phone in her hand, noticed exits the way she'd started noticing everything since Gangnam. But Seoul had a way of drawing you in deeper than you planned, and Min-jun knew the city the way only someone who grew up loving it can know a place. Gwangjang Market, as the evening cooled, the vendors and the noise and the smell of food that had been perfected over decades. A bookshop in Insadong, where the owner recognized Min-jun and brought out something from the back she hadn't asked for, and he'd apparently been waiting on for months. A rooftop cafe in Yeonamdong, where 4 neighborhoods were visible from one table and the coffee was extraordinary. She photographed everything. She was good at her job, genuinely, naturally good. And being behind the lens again after days of anxiety felt like finding something she'd put down without meaning to. She was laughing at something Min-jun had said, camera still raised, when she felt the shift in his expression. Small, almost invisible. She lowered the camera. Jae-won was standing 20 feet away. He'd come, he said, because Min-jun had sent him a location. Security reasons. Zara looked at Min-jun. Min-jun looked at the sky. They ended up at Namsan Tower as the evening settled into night. The tower lit up above the city, the railings covered in padlocks, thousands of small, heavy acts of love and courage catching the light in every direction. Min-jun's phone rang. He stepped away with an expression of theatrical innocence that convinced absolutely nobody. Jae-won came to stand beside her at the railing. The city below them was alive and golden and went on forever. He sent you a pin, she said. He did. And you came. I had business nearby. Right. She turned back to the view. The locks caught the light all around them. Years of them. Decades of people who came up here and said I choose this out loud in metal and key. All these people, she said quietly, locking themselves to someone. Doesn't that seem terrifying? You're saying, here, I'm yours. Now you can hurt me. She felt him shift slightly beside her. Just enough. Or brave, he said. 2 words, almost taken by the wind. She turned. He was already looking at her. Not at the city, not at the locks. At her. Something in his face she hadn't seen before. Unguarded. Unmanaged. Something real underneath all that careful architecture visible for just one unprotected second. Her heart did something she immediately instructed it not to do. His phone rang. He answered, stepped back. The moment closed like it had never opened. Min-jun reappeared at her elbow with the expression of a man who had seen everything and was heroically pretending otherwise. Ready? He said. Yes, she said. She didn't look at Jae-won on the way down, but she carried those 2 words all the way home, turning them over like something found on a beach that she couldn't identify but wasn't ready to put down. That night she sat on the rooftop alone and opened her father's journal. She'd been avoiding it, Grief arrives in waves. Sometimes the journal felt like closeness, and sometimes it felt like loss, with nothing on the other side. She hadn't been sure which one she'd get tonight. She opened it anyway. His handwriting was small and careful. A younger version of him on these pages. Ambitious, restless, the son of a man who worked himself thin so his children wouldn't have to. She read slowly. Atlanta in the early 90s. Work, movement. The particular hunger of someone who believes the world owes them a chance and is determined to collect. And then an entry that made her stop. Seoul, 1995. Her father had come to Seoul in 1995. She sat with that for a moment. She had never known that. Not once, not in passing, had he ever mentioned Seoul as a place he'd been. She kept reading. The entry was careful the way he was always careful. Broad strokes, chosen words, the language of someone describing something they survived and are grateful for and would rather not revisit in detail. A deal, a situation that deteriorated, people who were not what they appeared, and a name. She read it twice, looked up at the city, read it again. Oh Sung-jin. Her hands were not entirely steady as she typed the name into her phone. The results loaded. Her face changed completely. Oh Sung-jin, chairman of the O Group, patriarch, deceased, Jaewon's father. She sat very still on that rooftop for a long time. The city moved below her. Seoul kept being Seoul, indifferent, brilliant, completely unbothered by the fact that the ground had just shifted beneath one woman sitting alone above it. Her father had been in Seoul in 1995. He had met Oh Sung-jin. And 30 years later, his daughter was sitting on Oh Sung-jin's son's rooftop. She closed the journal, looked at the city, looked at her hands. This was not a coincidence. She didn't know yet what it was. But she knew, with the bone-deep certainty her father had spent a lifetime teaching her, that she had just found the thread that explained everything. She just didn't know yet whether pulling it would reveal something beautiful or something she wasn't ready for. She went inside, said nothing. Not yet. She didn't say anything to Jaewon the next morning. She came into the kitchen, made coffee the way she always did now, set his cup near him without a word, and sat at the counter with her journal closed in front of her, and her mind anything but. He glanced at her once. She was good at composure, had been her whole life, but something must have shown because he looked at her a beat longer than usual before returning to his phone. She almost told him right then. She didn't. She needed to understand it herself first. What it meant that her father had been here. What it meant that he'd met this man's father and never once mentioned it. What it meant that she was sitting in this apartment in this city with this particular family and calling it coincidence was starting to feel like a choice she was making rather than a fact she was stating. She took her camera to the rooftop and shot the city for hours and tried to organize her thoughts the way she organized a frame. Find the focal point, let everything else fall into context around it. She couldn't find the focal point. She was still trying when her phone buzzed. A message from Min Jun, a cafe recommendation in Mapo-gu. A place he said did the best bingsu in Seoul, and she needed to try it before she left. She needed air anyway. She needed to be somewhere that wasn't this apartment, with its weighted silences and its unanswered questions, and the man who said 2 words on a mountain and made her heart do something inconvenient. She went alone. Told herself that was fine. The cafe was small and warm and exactly the kind of place Min Jun would know about. The sort of spot that doesn't advertise itself because it doesn't need to. Regulars keeping it alive through decades of quiet loyalty. She found a table by the window, ordered, opened her laptop, tried to look like a person doing normal things in a normal city on a normal day. She almost managed it. He sat down across from her without asking. She looked up from her screen and every instinct she had, every instinct that had been quietly calibrating itself since Gangnam, fired at once. The man was unremarkable looking. That was the first thing. Medium height, neat clothes, the kind of face that wouldn't stay in your memory if you passed it on the street. He ordered coffee pleasantly, like they were old friends who had arranged to meet, and smiled at her with the patient ease of someone who had nowhere else to be and nothing to prove. "Miss Kingston," he said, "I've heard so much about you." She said nothing. Her hand moved to her phone under the table. "I wouldn't," he said pleasantly. "Not yet." He talked for a while. About Seoul. About photography. About the O family. With the specific intimacy of someone who had been studying them, not as people but as a system, mapping weaknesses the way a surgeon maps a body before deciding where to cut. He knew things. Specific things. The kind of detail that told her he had been watching for a very long time. Then he slid a photograph across the table. She looked at it. Her face didn't move. She'd learned that from her father. Whatever you feel, you choose when to show it. The photograph showed someone who had once been close to Jae-won. The implication of what had happened to them was clear and quiet, and infinitely more frightening than anything loud would have been. "My name is Baek Sung-ho," he said, standing, buttoning his jacket with the calm of a man concluding a pleasant business meeting. "I don't want to hurt you, Miss Kingston. I want to hurt him." A pause at the door, not looking back. "You're just the most efficient way to do that." He left. The cafe continued around her. Someone laughed at another table. The person behind the counter called out an order. The city went on being the city outside the window, completely indifferent to the fact that Zara Kingston was sitting very still, with her coffee going cold and her hands perfectly steady through an act of will that cost her everything she had. She thought about the flight Dom had been quietly researching since the first phone call. She thought about Atlanta and her apartment and her life that was sitting there waiting for her exactly as she'd left it. Uncomplicated, familiar, entirely hers. She thought about a first aid kit on a kitchen counter left without a word. She thought about a man sitting on the floor of a children's home with a small boy and a drawing, completely at peace in a way he never was anywhere else. She thought about 2 words spoken into the wind on a mountain that she still hadn't put down. She put her phone in her bag. She went home. She found him by accident the next morning. She'd gone out early with her camera, a route she'd started to know, a quiet neighborhood she'd been documenting. She took a wrong turn somewhere between one street and the next and found herself outside a building she didn't recognize. Low, modest. A hand-painted sign above the door. A children's home. She almost kept walking. Then she saw him through the window. Jae-won. Oh. No coat. No phone. No entourage. Sitting cross-legged on the floor with a small boy, both of them bent over what looked like a drawing, completely absorbed in it. The boy said something and Jae-won laughed. Really laughed. Open and unguarded and entirely himself. And Zara stood on that pavement and felt something rearrange itself permanently inside her chest. The children knew him. Not formally, not carefully. The way children know someone who simply keeps showing up, who comes back, who sits on the floor, who stays until the thing is finished. She didn't raise her camera. This one wasn't for anyone else. She slipped away before he saw her and carried it home like something precious. This piece of him that his world didn't get to touch, that she now knew about and would keep knowing about, quietly, privately, for as long as it mattered. That evening she showed him the photograph, the one from Gangnam, him half-turned in the fractured light, looking almost peaceful. "Delete it," he said. "Why?" "Because that person doesn't exist." "I saw him this morning," she said, "at the children's home." The room changed, not dramatically. He didn't move, didn't look away. Nothing visible shifted. But the air did. The particular atmosphere of a man whose carefully maintained surface has just been seen through by someone who wasn't supposed to see through it. "You weren't meant to see that," he said. "Why? Because it's real? Because it's the part of you that has nothing to do with any of this?" He was quiet for a long time. "In my world," he said finally, "vulnerability gets people killed." "I know," she said. "That part of you is yours. I won't tell anyone." Something moved through his face, slow and unfamiliar, like a man receiving something he'd stopped expecting anyone to offer. He didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. She left him with it. The next morning, Soo-yeon-oh found Zara alone in the kitchen. She had seen Jaewon's mother only at a distance before this. A composed, elegant woman who moved through the apartment on her occasional visits like someone who owned every room she entered without needing to announce it. She had not been unkind to Zara. She had also not been warm. Her eyes, when they landed on Zara, carried the specific weight of a woman doing a calculation she hadn't finished yet. This morning she sat down across from Zara at the kitchen counter and was quiet for a moment. The quiet of someone choosing words with the same care other people choose weapons. "I was not kind to you when you arrived," she said. "I want you to know I am aware of that." Zara said nothing, waited. "I have spent 20 years watching this family consume everything that came close to it," Soo-yeon continued. Her voice was steady, the steadiness of someone who has made peace with a truth that cost them something significant. "My husband. Good men. People who loved us without understanding what that love would require of them." She looked at Zara directly. "I have watched my son carry this empire since he was 19 years old. I have watched him become exactly what this family needed. A pause that held the weight of years. I have never once seen him put it down for anything." The city was quiet outside the windows. "He puts it down," Soo-yeon said, "when you are in the room." The silence between them was full and warm and serious all at once. "I don't know whether to be grateful or terrified," Soo-yeon said. "Both seems reasonable," Zara said honestly. Something crossed Soo-yeon's face, almost a smile, the kind that costs something. "Your father was a good man," she said. "Sung-jin spoke of him until the day he died. Marcus Kingston, the only man he ever met who did the right thing without needing it to cost him something." She paused. "I see that in you." Zara felt the weight of that settle somewhere deep and quiet inside her. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly. Soo-yeon studied her for a long moment. Everything she'd protected and lost and was still holding together visible in that look. Then she nodded, once, small, final. The kind of nod that in her world meant more than any speech ever could. She stood, paused at the door without turning. "He has never in his life," she said quietly, "asked the universe for anything." A beat that stretched across everything. "Don't make him regret that he finally did." She left. Zara sat with those words for a long time, feeling the full shape of them, the love inside them, the fear inside them, the extraordinary weight of what it meant that this woman, who had watched the empire take everything, was standing at a door asking her to stay. She already knew her answer. She had known it since a first aid kit appeared on a kitchen counter without explanation. What happened next came fast, the way crises always do, without warning and without the courtesy of arriving one thing at a time. The Bayek syndicate moved. Min-jun was taken. The apartment transformed overnight into something cold and operational, every soft thing erased like a light switched off. Jae-won became the version of himself the world required. All walls, all precision, the man built for exactly this, doing exactly what he was built for. Zara didn't get in the way. She didn't leave either. The exchange went wrong in a way that wrong things go wrong. Too many variables, too little margin. Someone moved toward Jae-won from a direction he hadn't accounted for. Zara saw it first. She thought about Baek Sung-ho's pleasant smile, about the photograph slid across a cafe table like a promise, about every single moment the universe had offered her a clear exit, and she had chosen to stay anyway. She thought about Soo-yeon at the door. He has never in his life asked the universe for anything. She stepped forward, into the space between Jae-won and the threat, steady, unhesitating, completely certain, her voice quiet as everything immovable. "Don't." One word, still as stone. Security moved. The situation closed in seconds. Min-jun came home, but Jae-won had seen. He stood very still looking at her afterward, with something in his face that had no name in any language his world had ever taught him. She had known about the threat. He understood that now, that she'd been approached, that she'd stayed anyway. And she had stepped in front of him without a single moment of hesitation. Nobody had ever done that. He told her she was leaving Seoul that night, his voice careful and controlled in the way of someone being careful and controlled on purpose. You don't get to decide where I go. Someone has to. I know what Baek Sung-ho said to me in that cafe, she said quietly. I know exactly what staying here means. I made that choice with full information. Don't take it away from me now by pretending it's yours to make. Something in him broke open completely. I don't know how to want something just for myself, he said, the most honest thing she had ever heard from him. Raw and real and costing him something visible to say out loud. Everything has always belonged to the empire, the name, the family. I have never once. He stopped. I don't know how to just want. Yes, you do, she said softly. You've been doing it since the moment you picked up that photograph. He looked at her. She looked back. He found her on the rooftop an hour later. No words at first, just him coming to stand beside her the way he always did. Naturally, inevitably, like something finding its place after a long time away from it. Seoul below them, the night air, everything that had happened between a Gangnam Street and this rooftop suspended somewhere around them. Almost every small gesture, every debt paid and paid forward across 30 years into this exact night. She had her camera in her hand. She always had her camera in her hand. It was the most constant thing about her. The one thing that had been true from Atlanta to Seoul to this rooftop and every moment in between. Behind the lens, she was most herself. Behind the lens, she was safe. She was looking out at the city when she felt him move, not toward the railing, toward her. She turned and he was closer than she expected, close enough that she could see the exact moment he made a decision. Something shifted in his face. The calculation that was always running behind his eyes went quiet. And in the silence that replaced it was something she had only seen once before, through a window, on a floor, with a small boy and a drawing. Him. Actually him. He reached out slowly and she thought he was going to touch her face the way he almost had a dozen times and always pulled back from. He took her camera. Gently. Both hands. Like he understood exactly what he was holding. She let him. She didn't know why she let him. She just did. He looked at it for a moment, turned it over slightly the way you hold something unfamiliar that you want to understand. Then he raised it, and he pointed it at her. She went completely still. Nobody photographed Zara Kingston. That was the arrangement she had with the world. She was the one behind the lens, the one who saw and captured and kept. She was not the subject. She was never the subject. It was the one boundary she had maintained so long it had stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like a fact about her. She didn't step back. She didn't look away. She just stood there in the Seoul night with the city blazing behind her and let him see her, fully, completely, without the camera between her and the world for the first time in longer than she could remember. The shutter clicked. One photograph. Just one. He lowered the camera slowly and looked at the screen for a long moment. Something moved through his face. The same something she had watched move through it when she told him she'd seen him at the children's home. Undefended, unmanaged, real. He turned the camera around and showed her. She looked at the screen. She had photographed thousands of people in her career. She understood instinctively what it meant when a photograph caught something true, when the person in the frame was genuinely themselves and not a performance of themselves. She could see it in a fraction of a second. It was the thing she was best at. She saw it now. in herself. The woman on that screen was not composed or careful or professionally neutral. She was not managing anything or performing anything or holding anything at a careful distance. She was standing on a Seoul rooftop at night, looking at a man who had just done something nobody had ever done before, seen her, specifically her, and decided that was worth keeping. And her face showed every single thing she felt about that. She looked like someone who had just arrived somewhere they didn't know they were going. She looked like someone who had stopped running without noticing the moment it happened. Her throat tightened. She looked up from the screen. He was watching her. Not the city, not the photograph. Her. That person, he said quietly, exists. Her own words. Returned to her. Quietly, precisely, in the language she understood better than any other. Not a speech. Not a declaration. Not something performed for anyone's benefit. Just the truth. Offered simply. By a man who had spent his entire life treating truth as a liability and had just chosen for the first time to put it down where someone else could see it. She felt something move through her chest, wide and warm and completely irreversible. My contract ended today, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. I know. I called my editor. He didn't look away. Indefinite extension, she said. The story isn't finished. Something real and rare moved across his face, the ghost of something that in another life on another man might have been a smile. Here it was something quieter than that, something more earned. The city, he said. The city, she confirmed, among other things. He reached out then, slowly, giving her every moment to decide, and took her hand. Not dramatically, not with the weight of a grand gesture. Just his hand around hers, quiet and certain, the way he did everything that actually mattered to him, like a decision that had already been made and was simply being acknowledged out loud. She looked down at their hands, looked back up at him. I'm not running, she said. I know, he said. And for the first time, the very first time, she heard something in his voice that had nothing to do with control or calculation or the empire or the name. Just him. Just this. Seoul blazed below them, gold and endless and completely unbothered by the two people standing above it who had just quietly changed everything. She took the camera back gently, looked at the photograph of herself one more time. Then she turned the lens toward him. The same angle as that first unguarded photograph from Gangnam, the one she'd never deleted, the one that started all of this. He saw what she was doing. He didn't say delete it. He didn't look away. He let her. The shutter clicked. She looked at the screen. Him. Real and present, and finally at peace. No walls. No performance. No empire requiring anything from him in this exact moment. Just a man who had ordered a stranger brought to him and had not once in all the weeks since been able to explain what happened when she arrived. She lowered the camera and looked at him. That person, she said softly, exists too. He looked at her for a long moment. The city behind them. The night around them. Everything that had led here and her father and his father and a photograph in 1995 and a surveillance image on a Thursday evening, and a street in Gangnam, and a first aid kit, and 2 words on a mountain and a cafe, and a children's home, and a mother at a door. All of it arriving here, all of it making sense here. I know, he said quietly. I think I'm just learning how to let him. She held his gaze. He held hers. And that was everything. That was all of it. 2 people standing on a rooftop in Seoul with the whole city below them and the whole future ahead of them and nothing resolved, and nothing simple and nothing guaranteed, choosing each other anyway. Not with a grand gesture, not with a declaration, but with a photograph and a returned word and a hand held quietly in the dark above a city that had brought them here from opposite sides of the world and had never once apologized for it. And sometimes, in a life full of things you never got to choose, That is everything. If this story moved something and you hit that like button right now, it costs you nothing and it means everything to this channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we tell stories like this every single week and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Drop a comment below and tell me, what was the moment that got you? Because I already know which one it was. She came here to photograph a city. She stayed for something no camera could capture. And somehow, in the end, Kim Peter, the camera captured it anyway.